Yonkers. That's what Eli Sly calls most hunters who visit his Montana ranch. The term has its origins in two hunters he once guided. They were from Yonkers, New York, and were so green they let deer after deer slip by them. The pair seemed incapable of hitting anything beyond 50 yards. Last season was a particularly frustrating one for Eli. Big deer were in short supply on his ranch, and a dry, warm fall made even dumb fork horns unapproachable. By mid-season, although some 20 hunters had passed through his gateposts and covered the pastures that sprawled over 2 counties, only 3 tags had been filled. True, there had been opportunities, but few hunters had connected. Reasons had been cited: spooked deer, running deer, out-of-range deer, but at the root of all the muffs and misses lay the inescapable fact that most of the hunters had been, well, yonkers. Then one day at a farm auction, Eli's date with destiny was heaved on the block, and he recognized it immediately. It was a mounted mule deer head, obviously some snowbound rancher's attempt at taxidermy. It was moth-eaten and dusty. It had an ear split that revealed a tin bolster inside, and a nose painted brown instead of black. But it had a giant rack. The tobacco-chewing, clod-kicking ranchers and farmers in attendance had a laugh when Eli's bid of $1 bought the mount. "What in blazes are you going to do with that thing?" one of them asked. Eli just chuckled. A hunt with Eli always begins as dawn warms and glows on the horizon. His ranch runs east from the corrals up to a dry coulee, then it forks south and north 2 miles away. Eli always takes a south fork and drives a route that scribes a huge circle past wheat fields, twisting canyons, sparse stands of juniper, some ponderosa pine. There's sandstone ledges, washouts, and sagebrush. Beautiful country. At selected points along this route, canyons are glassed, drives are organized, water holes are watched, and hunters are counseled on the ways of mule deer. There's a place not 100 yards before you get to the fork where a lone juniper has taken base at a steep cut bank 25 yards from the side of the road. That was the spot Eli chose for the decoy deer. In his cluttered shop, Eli unearthed a 5-foot piece of threaded steel pipe. He screwed a T on one end, then extended the T 6 inches on each side with more pipe. With plumber's tape, he affixed the T to the wooden plaque of the back of the mounted head and put the contraption in the bed of his pickup, along with a 30-gallon oil drum and a big piece of rawhide. After a short ride and a little rigging, he'd be ready for any and all yonkers. So he rolled the drum to the base of the cut bank and pushed the pipe supporting the mounted head into the soft earth at one end. Then he draped the hide over the drum. Now, from as close as 25 yards away, it looked very much like a real breathing animal. And one hell of a trophy to boot. Eli chuckled once again. His objective was not so much to play a practical joke as it was to prove a point. Many times he had whispered, "There's a deer," only to have his hunter at his side say, "Where? I don't see any deer," as the animal loped over the hill and out of sight. So with that in mind, Eli coached every hunting party the same way. As he and his hunters neared the last stretch of wheat field, in a few miles before the fork in the road, Eli would mention that a great gray ghost of a granddaddy buck had been seen near the ranch the day before. Hunters had caught no more than a glimpse of him, and no one had shot, so he was quite sure the animal was still around. "Oh, keep a sharp eye out now," Eli warned. "The hunt's not over yet." The first place he'd stop would be a half a mile from the barrel buck, which was in plain view. He would suggest that somebody glass the coulee bottom below. The second stop was about 125 yards away from the deer. The road made a slight curve behind the hill that momentarily obscured the deer, and at that point, the decoy again popped into plain view. "Man alive, he's big," he bellowed. Eli cleared the driver's seat and yelled, "Take a rest!" Jack, his client, rolled out of one side, and Jill tried to exit on the other. But her rifle got wedged across the pickup's door and blocked her way out. She kept throwing her weight against the stock, trying to make the rifle bend in the middle. Meanwhile, Jack had assumed a kneeling position in the dirt. But instead of chambering a shell, he inexplicably hit the clip release on his and his clip and shells fell into the grass. He tried to put the clip in backwards. "Man alive, he's big," he said again, his glazed eyes fixed on the animal. The clip slipped from his grasp once more, and this time when he tried to push it back in, it finally snapped home. Jack chambered a shell, shouldered the gun, and fired. Boom! Kerwang! The almost melodious ring of vibrating metal instantly followed the muzzle blast. "You missed!" Eli yelled. "Shoot him again!" Boom! Kerwang! The note jumped an octave higher as the bullet struck a stiffer section of steel. "I must have hit him," Jack said. "Well, his head's still up. Shoot him between the eyes." By this time, Jill had gathered herself together. She took aim from an offhand position and drilled that mounted head square in the middle of the skull. Sawdust shot out of both ears like cartoon smoke from a character who had eaten a too-hot tamale. There was a puzzled silence for an eternal second. Jack turned, confused, to Eli, whose face was flushed from the strain of suppressed laughter. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. Realization crept across Jack's face. "Son of a gun," he grinned, looked down, and kicked the dirt. The statistics Eli amassed during that last half of the hunting season were astounding. Out of the 40 hunters he guided, not one saw the deer from a half a mile away. At 125 yards, the sun played a major role in the sightings. When the deer was in direct sunlight, nobody missed spotting it. When the weather was cloudy, only about a third of the hunters saw it. And when the low afternoon sun cast a shadow from the lone juniper over the buck, no one saw it, even from 25 yards away. There were two other memorable incidents. Two hunters pumped 21 rounds into the pinging steel drum before they suspected that something wasn't quite right. Another one was Eli's hired man, after having driven past the deer at least 7 times, finally saw it at close range. He was on a piece of farm machinery without a gun, so he tried to sneak up on the animal with a tire iron, thinking that it was wounded. The deer lost an ear in the ensuing battle. And 2 persons passed Eli's test with flying colors. One client refused to shoot because the animal had been spotted from a vehicle and it offended his sense of chase. A neighbor of Eli spotted the deer at 125 yards, stepped out of the truck, shouldered his gun, and after a long pause said, "You ain't gonna sucker me into shooting no stuffed deer." To a man and a woman, they all took Eli's lesson good-naturedly, and a bit reflective too, for it raised a nagging question. Just how many real deer does one overlook in the course of a season? One question remains. How did I fare? Well, I never took the test. I happened to arrive at the ranch on a bright sunny day when Eli wasn't guiding. He had sent some local hunters of his acquaintance into the north wheat field that morning, and they were due back any moment, so he told me about the experiment and we laughed. Just as we were about to go to the house, a muffled popping of gunfire rolled from over the east. Boom! Kerwang! Laugh wrinkles creased Eli's cheeks and his eyes danced. "Sure got them yonkers this year," he said, and he chuckled once more. Thanks, folks. That's a great story, but you know what? I'd like to tell your story. If you'd like to send it in to me, just email it to info@themoosewhisperer.com. You can write it all out for me or just send in a voice recording and let me tell it to the world. Thanks for watching, folks, and hey, more stories to come.